Hi guys, it's Pixel here, and today I have a really powerful crit blasting Flay build for you. Let's start things off by looking at how to play this. We always want to have Reaper form active to get an additional life pool that will turn us back to human form when dropping to 0. Now when we kill an enemy with Flay, it triggers Blood Eruption, which is a huge orb that quickly explodes, dealing damage to enemies in the area. And the damage output for Blood Eruption is actually very good, as this build is a hybrid melee and spell build. And Flay doesn't only trigger Blood Eruption. Whenever we hit an enemy, it also triggers Chaos Bolts, meaning that whenever we hit an enemy with Flay, Chaos Bolts fly all around us, both dealing a great amount of damage to enemies, but in turn also triggering some interesting stuff. The first thing is that it triggers Bone Curse. Now, the good thing about this is that we get 13% chance on hit per curse on the target to get 13 mana on hit with this Warlock passive node. And with the marked for death curse on hit with Flay, we have a 26% chance to gain 13 mana on hit. It's not a lot, but it contributes quite well to our mana sustain. The second big thing is that Chaos Bolts triggers Harvest. This chance to trigger is based on our dexterity, so with 35 dexterity, this has a 35% chance to trigger each time. And ideally, we'd want even more dexterity to trigger this even more frequently. But even though we want to have as many additional hits as possible with Harvest, other important things are the critical strike and movement speed buffs we get when Harvest hits enemies, and we'll look more into that in the skill section. But first, let's head back to Flay again. When we critically strike enemies with Flay, we also cast Marrow Shards at a nearby enemy. And since we juice up Marrow Shards with a lot of multiplicative damage, plus the insane spell damage boost from the Flay skill tree, this is a great contribution to our damage output. And since this is a trigger-only skill, it doesn't have to be on our skill bar. This goes for Chaos Bolts as well, leaving 2 slots open for other skills. We fill these 2 slots with Transplant and Death Seal. Transplant is used to cover ground faster in between enemy packs, or when you need to get out of telegraphed boss attacks. Death Seal should be used whenever you face dangerous rare mobs or bosses, as it makes us take much less damage, and 90% of our hit damage taken over 4 seconds, a huge defensive skill. And the final piece of the puzzle is that whenever Harvest is off cooldown, you should try to either hit a boss or rare enemy with it, or kill as many enemies you can with 1 hit. This is because our axe gives us a lot of mana when we do, and it's a vital part for sustaining mana for this build. And if you're wondering why I said Harvest as a cooldown, it's because we use the Executioner's Tithe Axe. This one converts direct uses of Harvest to Great Harvest, which has a 5-second cooldown. Great Harvest deals 150% more multiplicative damage and has a 50% more area of effect. And whenever we kill an enemy, we gain 3% of our mana, and 27% of our mana when it hits a boss or rare enemy. This is the most important way to sustain mana for this build, since Flay in itself and triggering so many Chaos Bolts on each hit consumes a lot of mana. So, to sum up the flow here, first go into Reaper form, then engage enemies with Flay. This will automatically trigger Blood Eruptions if you kill an enemy, and Chaos Bolts and Marrow Shards if you hit an enemy. Chaos Bolts in turns triggers Harvest that gives us great buffs and damage. If you face tough enemies, use Death Seal. Rinse and repeat. Now, I want to mention an important thing about this build, and that is that we spec into the threshold bonus of the Corrupted Form Lich passive node. Now, this disables our health from going above half of our current max health, and the same goes for Ward. And since our max health is 4614, this means that our health cannot go above 2307, and our Ward cannot go above that as well. But the benefit we get from full points in this node is the insane increase to our endurance threshold. And we got an overcapped endurance as well, which reduces the damage from this threshold with 60%. And with this node into the mix, we have an insane health leech and leech rate that gives us massive survivability. Like what you see, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Let's jump into the most important stuff going on with our skills and the synergies between them. Let's start with our main culprit, Flay. First of all, we convert Flay from physical to necrotic damage with this node. This way, Flay is now scaled with all the damage from our weapons we'll look at later. Further, we spec into base crit chance from this node and crit multiplier from this node. This node also gives us a 100% chance to cast Marrow Shards on a nearby enemy when we critically hit an enemy with Flay. And this is not the only skill triggering we do. We also spec into the nodes on the left side here. We add full points into the node, giving us 20% more multiplicative spell damage per 100 max mana for any spell triggered by Flay. This is a huge bonus and gives us an incentive to stack mana for both mana sustain and insane spell damage. And the last cherry on top here is the Chaos Rip node, giving us 1% chance per 1 maximum mana to trigger Chaos Bolts on hit. With our idle base mana, this amounts to 4 guaranteed Chaos Bolts to trigger and 11% chance for another one to trigger. But since our mana pool increases greatly during battle, we trigger up to 6 Chaos Bolts at the most. As for Chaos Bolts, this is not just a utility skill. We actually do a lot of spell damage and necrotic damage with this build, which is actually what Chaos Bolts do. This is why we maximize the damage output of this skill as much as we can. We also take this node to give Chaos Bolts a 10% chance to recast, and this node to add another curse onto enemies, Bone Curse. But the final and most influential node of them all is this one, giving Chaos Bolts a chance to trigger Harvest based on our dexterity. Each dexterity gives 1% chance, and we end up with 35% chance through our dexterity, which is a decent chance. There's room on some of our gear to replace intelligence stats with dexterity, dexterity, and ideally I think we should aim for at least 50 to 60 dexterity, and this should be quite easy to get. Higher than that is a bit unrealistic, and we have other stuff we need to spec into as well, and having 50 to 60 dexterity is a fine trade-off with that, I think. And when speaking of Harvest, let's have a look at its skill tree. We spec into necrotic resistance shred chance with this node, as much hit damage we can with this node, and even further hit damage with this node. And this is actually quite interesting. It gives more multiplicative hit damage per unique ailment on the target. We inflict many ailments with this build, so this gives us a lot of damage with Harvest. We also take the node giving us mana for each enemy killed with Harvest, or when hitting a rare enemy or boss, before taking the two juicy buffed nodes on the bottom left here. The first one giving us 100% global crit chance and 32% global crit multiplier for 4 seconds after Harvest has hit a cursed enemy, which is basically always. This is an insane buff. We also get 50% chance to gain haste on critical hits with Harvest, which is also more or less constantly, meaning that we have around 100% uptime of haste when in battle. This is why we allow ourselves to not have the best base movement speed, since we're constantly buffed with 30% increased movement speed anyway. Remember, every critical strike with Flay triggers marrow shards? Well, this is a great additional damage source for us, and in the skill tree we only focus on one thing, boosting the damage output as much as we can. The first one being max points in this node, doing 100% more multiplicative damage to bleeding enemies. And we do get some bleed chance from the 2 points in this node, but if you can manage to get an additional bleed chance elsewhere, such as a weapon, that's great. More on that later. Now, this node is actually quite cool. We get 100% more multiplicative damage if there's an available minion for marrow shards to consume. And we do actually frequently have some skeletons with us that are spawned based on the stat of our boots, so this insane damage boost actually kicks in quite often. As for Reperform, we take the increased attack and movement speed from this node, and the 50% crit multiplier from this node. Two great buffs. We also get 100% increased damage from this one, since we count as being on low life through the threshold bonus in the corrupted form Lich passive node. Also an insane buff, and 100% increased crit chance and damage from this node doesn't hurt as well, in addition to this node giving us a much needed flat necrotic damage. Now, as mentioned previously, we don't need Chaos Bolts or Marrow Shards on a skill bar, as these are only triggered through other skills. This enables us to have Transplant for movement and Death Seal for defense on there instead. Remember to activate Death Seal whenever you're fighting many rares or a boss. Now, if you want to get notified whenever I drop a new build guide, make sure to click the subscribe button. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can join the channel or support me through Patreon as well. Link in the video description. Thank you so much for all your support. Let's jump into an Echo to see how this build handles over 1000 corruption. And stick around because I'll drop a few key tips about the setup while we play. Let's look at our gear. We use Trader's Tongue in our offhand, as this gives an insane base critical strike chance. The implicit crit multiplier stat is always great, but the arguably even most important stats are the plus level to dexterity and intelligence skills. This gives Harvest and Flay 3 additional skill points, and it's even possible to get up to 4, so still room for improvement here. This dagger is very easy to get with 2 LP, and for my playthrough I even got several 3 LP ones. The most important stat is melee and spell necrotic damage, then crit multiplier. The necrotic flat damage is an important reason for why we convert our Flay damage to necrotic. If you manage to get a third one, try going for bleed chance on hit, as this will make sure Marrow Shards always get a hit damage bonus to bleeding enemies. We briefly talked about the Executioner's Tide Axe. It converts direct uses of Harvest to Great Harvest, and we should use that skill whenever it's not on cooldown to get mana on kill or boss or rare enemy hit. And you see here we also get 50% of our melee damage from our equipped weapons as spell damage for Chaos Bolts, which synergizes just perfectly for us. And with this axe we got some massive room for improvement. First of all, this one is quite easy to get with 2 LP, and if you manage to do that, the next stat you should slam onto here is the flat necrotic melee and spell damage affix. That would just boost the damage to insane levels. There's also room for a higher tier roll of the mana stat here, so yeah, this build got potential for much more damage output. We have the Bone Clamor Barbute helmet to utilize our high necrotic resistance, as it gives us 1 ward per second per 3% uncapped necrotic resistance. And the armor, intelligence and dexterity are also perfect for us. The army of skin boots gives us attack speed, movement speed and more multiplicative melee damage to high health enemies, as well as giving us up to 13 stacks of excoriation, which boosts Flay and Harvest area of effect and melee damage. Awesome boots. The ambition of an erased acolyte relic gives us +1 to all of our skills, which is immense. It also boosts our ward a lot, and it gives us a much needed endurance. We should try going for dexterity on this one, but the necrotic damage can easily be intelligence, crit multiplier, crit chance, mana and so on. The font of the erased ring is important for ward generation during combat. It also gives us increased life and mana, which is huge. If you can, then try to roll dexterity instead of intelligence, or at least make it half and half dexterity and intelligence. We use the Falcon Fist gloves to get the insane flat melee damage and increased attack speed stats. These boost our damage so much and are a vital part of our build. These gloves are also easy to get at least 2 LP for, if not 3. Here you should go for endurance and hybrid health. The most important thing is that you make sure you cap your endurance, and we do so with these gloves. Ideally, we'd want want to swap the intelligence stat with dexterity. Our reminder is that we ideally want the dexterity between 50 to 60, and ours is 35 at the moment. The null portent armor is just so nice. It gives us insane leech since our overkill damage is usually so high, and the increased health and physical resistance is also just perfect for us. It gives us 1% less damage taken per overcapped resistance, so if you need even more survivability, you can trade off some damage for more overcapped resistances if you want. This item can only drop from Aberoth, but has almost a 50% drop chance, so it's not rare at all. Our Shattered Chains belt is great for this build. It can be farmed by doing the Confluence of Oblivion Woven Echo, but it also has a slight chance to drop from the regular Shade of Orbis. It gives us a lot of melee damage, armor, and the best one, 5% more multiplicative melee damage per stack of Doom on the target. And since Doom can stack up to 4 times, which we constantly have on bosses at least, this means 20% more multiplicative melee damage. That's just huge. But how do we inflict Doom on targets? Well, we use the Siphon of Anguish ring, giving us a 25% chance to apply Doom on hit. It's also quite easy to get at least 2 LP for it. And on this one, you want to swap the health stat with at least a tier 5 physical resistance stat. This will enable us to take the increased armor blessing from Herod instead of the physical resistance one, which will boost our defenses a lot. Apart from that, you do want a tier 7 increased critical strike chance. We want our critical strike chance to be above 100% for any skill. Even though our melee critical strike chance will be below 100%, the base crit chance we spec into in our skill trees will make this go above 100%. And there is a very important reason why we want this, which leads us to our final item. Say hello to our primordial item for this build, the True Sight Glass Amulet. The main reason we go for this item is because of this stat, giving our hits a 40% chance to become deadly strikes, if the hit had a critical strike chance of above 100%. And what is deadly strikes? Well, deadly strikes give an additional 300% critical strike multiplier, which simply skyrockets our crit damage. And since we have above 100% crit chance for all our strikes, we have a constant 40% chance for all of these hits to become deadly strikes. That's an insane damage boost. Look for the orange crit numbers when doing damage. These are the deadly strikes triggering. For this build, you just follow the endgame build plan and progression sliders, because you can level this build just by following those progressions. The only difference is that you'll use Bone Curse during leveling with the Armor Shred chance and more multiplicative damage nodes. At level 5, specialize in Harvest, and at level 8, Bone Curse. At level 20, specialize in Reperform, and at level 35, Flay. At this point, also replace Bone Curse with Chaos Bolts. And at level 50, specialize in Marrow Shards. If you enjoyed this video, the best way to support me to make even more videos like this is by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. And if you feel I've earned even more of your support, it's possible to join the channel as a member or support me through Patreon. Link in the video description. And to see my other last debug build guide videos, click on the video card showing on the screen.